Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to everyone in the room, to our committee members, to those in the public gallery, and to those watching online. You are all very welcome. This is a meeting of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Transport and Infrastructure Committee. My name is Anna Smith, and I am the Statutory Deputy of the Combined Authority, and I'm chairing this committee on behalf of the Chair, Mayor Nick Johnson, who is unwell. And I'm sure that we would all want to start this meeting by sending our best wishes for his speedy recovery. So, Nick, if you're watching, we hope that you're with us again soon. We have a very interesting agenda today that involves the drawdown of significant amounts of funds. £25.4 million of capital and revenue expenditure. And this demonstrates the amount of work, both in the capital and revenue areas, that the Combined Authority and partners are continuing to deliver. And I'm sure at this point, and I'm sure we'll say this as we go through the meeting as well, I want to give my thanks to all the officers for the work that they are doing to help us deliver that programme. So we have a bus strategy currently out for consultation. Following a technical error, this was relaunched on Friday, the 13th of January, and continues for 6 weeks from that date. I ask that everyone here or watching engages with that consultation and actively promotes participation with your constituents. We want to get as many responses as possible to that consultation. Hopefully, you will be aware that the Combined Authority has managed to secure in excess of £820,000 worth of revenue support for itself and partners to deliver its active travel expertise and work programme, including the employment of an active travel advocate, the advert for which will be released, I believe, in the near future. This follows the successful attainment of a level 2 score by Active Travel England. And following the recent announcement by Active Travel England, the Combined Authority is working with constituent councils to develop a bid for funding through its Tranche 4 funding round. And those bids will need to be submitted by mid-February, and a key component of our bid will revolve around rural accessibility via active travel options. Finally, the Combined Authority has recently been informed by the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities that it has been successful in securing additional funding for passenger transport in Peterborough. We await further news around our Levelling Up Round 2 bid for Peterborough Station Quarter, and we hope to hear news on that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So a few items of housekeeping. The Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take photographs and use social media during the meeting should you wish. I would ask, though, that everyone present turns off their mobile phones to silent or vibrate. And I'm just checking mine whilst the meeting is taking place. I would also remind members and officers and members of the public that this meeting will be recorded. And could members of the committee please indicate to me if at any point during the meeting they need to take a short comfort break. So we now move on to the governance items, part 1 of the agenda. And our first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. With the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. There's no apologies for absence received.
Does anyone know if Councillor Bovingdon's on his way? Okay. But we are quorate, so we can continue. Thank you. Now, we have item 1.2, which is declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Treste.
Could you just confirm what you mean by your significant interest? Oh, okay. Yeah. So could you just confirm what your significant interests would be when you say that? Just to understand. Oh, we would say that would be okay because that's what your role is. So yeah.
Councillor Tereste, can I check? Would you like a hearing loop to be switched on if we have one? I'll just check to see if we have one. It looks unfortunately as we don't have a hearing loop in this space, so we will look into that for next time because that's really important that we are in a space that is accessible for you. Does it help if we look straight at you when we're talking? So if we can all make sure that we do that. And as we keep as close as possible, that's probably going to make it. Right, we'll all pull this in a little closer. And a reminder that if anything comes up during the meeting where you do have realised that you have an interest that you did not disclose at the beginning, it's absolutely fine to raise that as we go through. Please feel free to do so. And Councillor Tereste, thank you for raising that query because it's always best to check. So we're now going to move on to item 1.3 of the agenda, which you can find on pages 5 to 16 of your agenda packs. And this is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of November 2022. We are being asked to confirm these as an accurate record. So if any member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes, and it's just on the accuracy, can you please indicate that now? I see no objection, so we will take the minutes as approved, and I will sign those now as an accurate record. So we now move on to item 1.4, which is the Combined Authority Forward Plan. Tim, do you introduce this item or do we just ask for questions on it? Right, so does the committee have any comments or questions on the Combined Authority Forward Plan? Councillor Wakeford.
Thanks. I may have missed it, but I couldn't spot on this version the alternative fuel strategy, which was listed when we last met. I just wonder if I could check where that's at.
Yep, happy to pick that up. So the alternative fuel strategy is a component part of the local transport and connectivity plan. So it is within that paper, but there is probably an error. There is an error in the plan that we are intending to bring that back to this committee in March. So we'll make sure that's amended accordingly, and then allow the committee to discuss and agree, and ultimately, hopefully, recommend the approval of that at the subsequent board meeting.
Any more questions on that item? No, well, in which case we're going to move to item 1.5, which is public questions. We have one public question and one request to speak on an item. So firstly, we have a question from Mr. Anthony Carpen. Is Mr. Carpen here either online or in the room? Can't see him in the room, but right. So I suggest if you read out the question and then I will give the answer.
Thank you. So the question is as follows. Regarding item 2.3, Appendix 2, you said we did, and the solar panel installation at the Babraham Road, Cambridge Park and Ride site, the table makes clear that steps need to be taken to facilitate the use of electric vehicles as part of the CPCA's area's commitment towards zero carbon. The Building Research Establishment published guidance in 2016 on solar car parks, a guide for developers and owners. Please could you confirm that officers are aware of this publication and any subsequent newer versions, and make contact with the leading supermarkets and car park owning landowners to ask what steps they will take to get solar panels installed all over their car parks, as Cambridgeshire County Council is demonstrating can be done. Please could you also ask the business board to consider how it can use their business networks to start significant progress on this, and for solar panels on large warehouses they might own or lease. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpen, and I will give a short answer now, but of course you're also very welcome to get in touch if you would like more details. So previously, the Mayor has explored the use of his designated powers to ensure that key filling stations across the region provide electric recharge. In addition, following the previous approval of the Alternative Fuelled Vehicle Strategy, which is a daughter document to the LTCP, the Combined Authority is currently working on the Electric Vehicle Implementation Plan. This work will consider the BRE guidance, and the plan will be provided to the Business Board and the Transport and Infrastructure Committee to comment on. As part of the engagement with the Business Board, officers will actively encourage businesses to commence work on the planning and implementation of the solar car parks. Now, we also have a statement from Councillor Alan Marnes. Alan, I think you're here, is that right? Do you want to come forward to a microphone?
Is that right? And everybody can hear? Okay, thank you. Right. What I'd like to say is thanks to the Mayor, the Combined Authority members, and all those that have been involved, and the backroom people for having the vision and the energy to instigate the first real DRT service in Cambridgeshire, the Ting service. I'm a regular user of the Ting service. For my sins, I've been, for the best part of 40 years, a councillor and the chairman for Southoe and Midlow Parish Council for more years than I can remember. We're a small village on the edge of the A1, bigger in area than our neighbours Little Paxton and Buckton. We lost our regular bus service over 10 years ago, although the 66 bus service still goes through the middle of our parish on the A1, but it will not stop. Ever since the 66 service stopped, my council and I have campaigned for public transport to be available to everybody, not just those that live in the major conurbations. Sorry, technology's not really my thing. For far too long, the people that live or work to the west of the A1 in Cambridgeshire have been the very poor relations when it came to public transport, as there were no regular services other than to Sawtry. I attended the Combined Authority board meeting in this very room on the 30th of November. It was clear that some of the members had no idea what the Ting service means to those of us living to the west of the A1. And some members didn't even know how the Ting service worked whilst bemoaning it. The original stagecoach operation, after a few weeks, worked very well with an excellent app and phone contactable all the time the service was running. But the people that already had a very good service soon got to know that it was cheaper and easier to use the Ting service rather than the buses they already had, thus making it more difficult to get a service as all slots were very often taken. Those of us that lived to the west of the A1 struggled to book a ride. It sometimes seemed that the 30-seater buses were overkill with just a few passengers on, but I had been on one of the buses that had 15 people on. The Vectair operation, although it has issues with their app that they use, we are all getting used to it. It's not as good as the Stagecoach one, But after contacting Vectair, they have improved it, enabling to book return journeys, which was a problem at first because I couldn't get back home after booking a trip to out anywhere. Vectair say they are going to try new electric buses on the Ting service, which will be difficult if the drivers have to come from Loughborough every day, which they currently do. But I commend the vision to use this type of vehicle. I don't know if you have seen the Vectair leaflet, but I have a few copies here to leave with you. I've come here today on the Ting service and have rebooked to go home as well. This service I came on this morning has been very busy. I was the 5th pickup today, and the driver said it will be non-stop all day, as he has bookings already to show that it will keep him busy. I personally have filled out the Combined Authorities consultation. This is the one that closed last week, I think. And I would welcome the £30 per annum per home fee for everybody in the county and Peterborough to have the same opportunity for public transport that others have had for a long, long time. And say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll leave these leaflets with you if I may.
Thanks so much, Councillor Marnes. And yeah, please do leave the leaflets. And I don't have an answer as such because it was a statement, not a question, but I'm just wanted to say thanks so much for your support. Thank you, great. And thanks for the time that you've taken to come with some really helpful feedback on the service and the positives and the ways in which that service can be improved. I could see Tim taking notes as you were talking there. And that very much reflects the commitment of Mayor Nick, and I know the whole combined authority, to improving our bus services across the region, and particularly looking at rural bus services. And I love the fact that you came here on that Ting service today, and it's just really helpful. So thank you for these. Thank you for coming. We don't normally take kind of open out to debate on this one, Councillor Wakefield, but if it's a really short point, then go ahead.
You're kind. I wasn't sure if it was in order. Just to say, I'm also grateful for that. It echoes a lot of what we hear in Huntingdonshire among our more rural residents about the Ting service, and the additional detail we got there about how important it is really the rationale for the questions that I and others have raised previously at this committee to suggest the additional information you might seek to capture in surveys of the value of a Ting to get beyond sort of statistics, but to get that detailed insight into the lack of alternatives. But thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Councillor. So we're now going to move on to part 2 of the agenda, which is the delivery items on the agenda. So I'm now going to ask, we have 3 items on this, so this is 2.1, 2.2, also 2.4. So with the committee's acquiescence, I'm going to propose we look at all 3 of those in turn because they follow on from each other. I'm going to ask Tim, who is our lead officer on this, to just do an outline of the TCF programme before we move on to the individual items. So Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of reminder for members of the committee around where we are on the Transforming City Fund. So the Transforming City Fund programme went through the November round of committee where we looked at the programme and agreed that, and that went to board as a revised programme. Subsequent to that, the government have been in touch with all recipients of Transforming City Fund money to look at the deliverability of their programme. And that's nationally, that's not just around the combined authority, that is every authority that was in receipt of Transforming City Fund, and they've ranked each area on level of priority around where their concerns are. So high to low, the combined authority is ranked as a low priority from government, but we are engaging in that process. They're looking at the deliverability of our programme and making sure that we're getting to the stage gate we want to get to. So the three schemes that we're going to discuss on this, it's important that we continue to move momentum behind those schemes to allow us to then to demonstrate to government that we are continuing to do work on those areas, and accelerate the funding, and ensure that we do meet the programme that we agreed to previously, but also the individual project timeframes as well, to give government confidence that we can continue to deliver. So that was a short introduction, and I'll hand back to the chair.
So unless the committee has any overall strategic question they wish to raise at this point that may cover all of the items, and I'm flexible, we can take strategic questions as we go along as well, of course, I will suggest that we go on to the first of those items. Now, this is item 2.1, and it is the A1260 junction 32 to 3 full business case. You can find that on pages 17 to 352 of your packs. Could I ask Nathan Bunting, Programme Manager, to introduce this report? And Nathan is joining us via Zoom.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So like you said, this is item 2.1 on A1260 junction 32-3. So we're seeking recommendation to the Combined Authority Board to approve the full business case, which is in Appendix 1, and funds for construction, which includes drawdown of 5.85 million from the subject to approval line in the MTFP, and an additional £3,441,880 available from the Transforming Cities Fund programme, and also to recommend to delegate authority to the interim head of transport to enter into a grant funding agreement with Peterborough City Council. So this project has previously been to the July and August 2020 committee and board for approval of the outline business case, and in October 2022 board for approval of funding to accelerate the active travel elements of the scheme and to reprofile. The forecast target cost has increased since the OBC, and detail of this can be found in 2.7. Nevertheless, the project remains very high value for money at 6.49. So Junction 3 is a crucial cornerstone of the Parkway network in Peterborough, connecting the A1139 Fletton Parkway and the A1216 Neem Parkway, therefore providing the majority of access to southwest Peterborough. However, at the moment, it experiences significant peak hour congestion that this project will help to resolve. And because of its strategic location, the junction is critical to Peterborough's growth aspirations as set out in their local plan. So for the full list of deliverables, please see 3.1 in the paper. But among these things are the creation of third lanes and signalisations. Further, the project includes 2 active travel elements, so Melbourne Way footpath and Shrewsbury Avenue cycleway, therefore improving walking and cycling routes to help reduce unnecessary car journeys. And as a result, it is DFT gear change compliant. An additional active travel scheme at Fortress Way, outside the scope of the OBC stage, was submitted for consideration following a call for projects from the Department for Levelling Up. This was in mid-December. And whilst the CPCA included it within their shortlist, the scheme was not one of those chosen for additional funding, and therefore is no longer in the scope of this paper, but it does remain a really important scheme to us. So the last thing that I'll mention is that on top of the active travel improvements, there will be a minimum of 20% biodiversity net gain for the project. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Would any members of the committee wishing to ask a question or make a comment, please do so now. So I have Councillor Shaler, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Shaler, you first. What I'm going to suggest is we take these in small groups, and if that's okay with the officers, we'll take 1 or 2 or 3 questions at a time. and then we'll have answers on batches. So Councillor Shaler first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I realise that this is a scheme that is quite advanced, and this is relatively time sensitive, and that perhaps it was designed in a previous era. But given that we have today the local transport and connectivity plan, where we see what people want, and this is not the first time I've said this in this committee, but there seems to be a disconnect. I welcome the active travel element, but we're talking about 90% of the money is for building more road, and so we shouldn't, greenwash or say that this is some kind of an active travel scheme. It is to enhance car travel. And if, for instance, it says that on, where are we? 2.4, there's a balanced mix of highway and active travel elements. I have a bit of trouble with the word highway because for me, highway means active travel and all of the highway. So shall we say carriageway in this part, when 90% of it is actually carriageway, that I fail to see how this is some sort of a balance. But maybe I'm being pedantic. It says later on that it's about population growth in and around the Hamptons and south of the A1139. And it points out that this is the primary point of access. And in the local transport and connectivity plan, often what we're talking about is alternatives. Let's find other ways of moving people around. And I realize that Peterborough is different from Cambridge and from some of the other rural parts of Cambridgeshire. But it is interesting, this massive contrast. Imagine, for instance, that you were being asked to reduce traffic by 50% while increasing the numbers of people being moved in and around the city. Would we be going for this sort of a plan? But this is the kind of question that's being asked in other parts. And I wonder, there is also a reference to this being an encouragement to modal shift away from dependency on cars. I think that's, again, really, really pushing it in this case. If that were the case, I wonder how much we would spend on the active transport element in order to attain enough active transport to reduce congestion on this particular roundabout to the point where we didn't need to put an extra lane in. But I personally will support the drawdown of the money. I don't see an alternative at this point, but I just wanted to make those points, how there is this contrast and tension, I think, in what we are all trying to achieve. Thank you very much, Chair.
So I'll take Councillor Wakeford next, and then I'll bring you in, Councillor Chireste. And I didn't say this at the start, so I didn't cut in there, but we do have quite a long agenda, so I'm going to ask people to be brief, please, in their comments. So what I will do is I'll take Councillor Wakeford, then I'll take Councillor Chireste, then I'll take Councillor Thornborough, and then I promise officers we will stop at that point before any more comments so that you can come back on the ones you've had already. So Councillor Wakeford next, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'd have been happy to give way to Peterborough, but in interest of speed, thanks. I think Councillor Shaler makes good points that I think will want to guide our thinking about projects going forward. Likewise, though, I concur. Given where we are with this, I'm perfectly content to support proceeding. I think that's pragmatic. My question was just to understand the rationale for the increase cost, which is touched on in 2.7 in the paper, and the reference to increase active travel elements. We were had our attention drawn to active travel in 3.1. I just wanted to check what the reference was to the what are the additional bits that we're getting for the additional money as opposed to what was in it already? Just so I'm clear about that extra spend. Thank you.
Councillor Treste.
I got the right one. No, which button do I press? Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, I completely agree with my fellow councillor over there. We absolutely need to move into a different world where we try and reduce car travel and find alternative ways to get around our cities and our country. And of course, we are all trying to do that, me included. But the point I think about Junction 3, which a lot of people don't realise because they don't know the city, the point about Junction 3 is that Junction 3 feeds inadequately at the moment a population of about 15,000 people, plus people moving onto the A1. Now, you've all heard of Haddon, those that you are local, especially Huntingdon councillors, will have heard of Haddon. That's going to be probably 20,000 people, 5,300 houses, most of them 2 cars, 10,000 cars. Going to try and discourage that. They tried to discourage that in Hampton to a complete disaster. Most places in Hampton Vale, if you want to get an emergency vehicle down anywhere, you're not going to do it because people don't park where they're supposed to. They park on the streets and there's no way round and there's no alternative. So I completely agree, and we should be going forward to discourage people from using their vehicles, etc., 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 and find alternatives, which we are looking at, including light rail. But at the top, for the time being, if we want to make our cities work, particularly that part of Peterborough, Junction 3 is going to feed an extra 20, 25,000 people, could be 10,000 cars, and that's without the rest of Haddon being completed. So that's the issue that we've got. I completely agree with you, but we've got to deal with the problem that we have right now and then incrementally try and solve it.
So I'll take Councillor Thornborough and then we will pause for officer responses, but I will open out if any other councillors wish to make a statement. So Councillor Thornborough.
Yes, I'm pleased to hear about the 20% net gain in biodiversity, but in Cambridge, where we've had biodiversity through transport schemes, they've been most successful when they've engaged with the local communities. So actually looking at where not just planting near the transport improvements, but actually looking at what is significant as far as nature's concerned and what the residents want and how they can engage the residents to be part of the planting or the landscaping scheme makes it much more successful long term. And I wondered if that might be possible here because there's quite a lot of homes around this area. Thanks.
Thank you. So who's going to answer these? Nathan?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. So I think the first question was quite a strategic question, so I won't go into too much detail on that. Again, I can just stress the active travel elements and the alignment with the Peterborough local plan and the growth elements aligned to that. On the second question that was mentioned on 3.1, so I think you were asking, are there any additional elements since the OBC will be getting for the extra funding? So within the outline business case, there wasn't any active travel element built into it. It was in 2020, it was before the gear change LTM 120 DFT documents were published. So since then, we've made sure active travel elements are included. Again, environmental elements weren't within the target cost of the OBC, and they now are within the detailed design of the FBC. And we've put a lot of work into reducing tree loss and that sort of thing. And then it's the other things that we all know about, like the inflation since 2020 and things like that. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. The other question on biodiversity, I thought that was a really, really good point. And I've not been involved in developing the detail behind the 20% net gain biodiversity, but everything that you mentioned, I will pass back to the project team, make sure that they're conscious and aware of it, because we did really want to achieve a biodiversity net gain with this project to mitigate some of the things that have been mentioned previously.
Tim.
Yeah, so just to add to Nathan's point around the biodiversity element, and I think it's what I wanted to make a point in the LTCP piece, but I will do it here. If we are doing work around the implementation plan, around what is our scheme list, etc., what do we want to take forward, and as part of that thorough review, we need to look at the deliverability, that's key, but actually which parts of our LTCP objectives are these schemes hitting? So actually having a review of our total pipeline and portfolio of schemes. Do they still hit the LTP objective? One of those is the biodiversity element. One is natural environment, air quality, climate, but also productivity and all the other objectives of the LTCP. So part of our work that we need to do on developing the implementation plan will be a review of our scheme. So that will be built into that review to allow the committee to have a view of look at and a review of that as well going forward.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments from the committee on this item? Okay, in which case we are going to proceed to the votes on the recommendations. There are 4 recommendations here. And I may pause slightly between each one because there are different voting rules on each one in terms of what constitutes passing of that. So if there is a slight pause, please bear with me. But let's start with each recommendation in turn if we can. So recommendation A, recommend that the Combined Authority Board approve the full business case in Appendix 1. Can I see votes in favour, please? That's unanimous. Item B, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 5,850,000 from the subject to approval line in the MTFP to begin construction. Can I see votes in favour, please? I'm seeing a pattern here. I'm going to be bold and suggest, does anyone object to us taking recommendations C and D together? No, we have to take them separately because they're different voting arrangements. So item C, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve 3.441880 million from the Transforming Cities Fund programme, also for construction of the scheme. Votes in favour? That's unanimous. And recommendation D, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to delegate authority to the interim head of transport in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer to enter into a grant funding agreement with Peterborough City Council. Votes in favour? That's again unanimous. So all of those items are passed unanimously. Thank you. We now move on to item 2.2, which you will find on pages 353 to 640 on your pack. And this is on the Fengate Access Study, and Emma White is going to speak to that. Emma, if you can come up and start speaking when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The Transport and Infrastructure Committee is recommended to note the completed Fengate Phase 1 full business case, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 6.6 million to construct the Fengate Access Study improvement schemes, and recommend that the Combined Authority delegate authority to the Interim Head of Transport in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer to enter into a grant funding agreement with Peterborough City Council. Fengate previously came to Transport and Infrastructure Committee and CA Board 2 months ago to approve the acceleration of the active travel elements of the scheme and the utility C4 costs. The Fengate project is part of the Transforming Cities Fund, and the programme of this was agreed at the last committee and CA Board. The full business case for Fengate is complete and split into 5 dimensions. The strategic dimension considered the policy context in which the scheme has been developed, as well as the need for the intervention. The economic dimension demonstrates that the Fengate Access Study improvement scheme achieves a benefit cost ratio of 4.95 and offers a very high value for money. The financial dimension demonstrates that the scheme has been robustly costed and fits with the funding allocation available. The commercial dimension demonstrates that the schemes can be reliably procured and implemented with delivery and supervision delivered by Peterborough Highway Services. And finally, the management dimension demonstrates that PCC, through the framework, has the necessary experience and governance structure to successfully manage and deliver the Fengate Access Study improvement schemes. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on this. And Tim, I see Nathan is not on the call anymore, but could you pass on our thanks as a committee to him for his work on that previous item as well? Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this item? Councillor Wakeford.
Forgive me, Chair. It arises from this item, but I suppose is more general and happy to pick up at a separate point. I have no hesitation supporting this. But just looking at the key activity timeline on 474 of the pack, very helpfully, I'm sure there's post-scheme monitoring planned going forward. Help us understand the value of the large amounts of money that we're spending. Very happy to see those included. I suppose I'm struck that presumably post-scheme monitoring from things we've undertaken previously should be more in evidence from our forward plan. So perhaps not now, given where we are on the agenda, but I'd certainly be grateful to understand how we make sure that we are following through on monitoring committed to on money that's already been spent. But as I say, happy to vote in favour on this item.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item? I don't know, Tim, are you best placed to answer that particular question?
So as part of our ongoing review, I think that it's critical that we look at how schemes being monitored, lessons learned, etc. So part of that, the plan that I articulated earlier, that's looking forward, but actually we do continue need to look back around and lessons learned. So anything that we can find on those areas, I think, is key, and we will consider how to best to present that to board, to committee, because ultimately we don't want to drown you with information, but we need to give you the appropriate information, and whether that's on a scheme by scheme basis or that's on a strategic basis, we'll take that away and consider, and then come back to the next committee and outline how we're going to do that.
Thank you, Tim. And I think that's something we will all find very helpful as a committee. So look forward to hearing about how you're planning to do that. Are there any other questions on this item? In which case, we'll move to the vote on this item. Recommendation A is simply to note. Can I check with the monitoring officer? Do we need to vote on the noting items? No. So recommendation A is a note. Recommendation B is the recommendation of the approval of the drawing down of the funding. Can I see votes in favour of that recommendation, please? That's unanimous. Recommendation C is the delegation of authority to the interim head of transport in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the monitoring officer to enter into the grant funding agreements with Peterborough City Council. Can I see votes in favour? Again, that's unanimous. Thank you. So that is passed. So to change the published running order, I now propose to take item 2.5, the March Area Transport Study. So that item is on page 845 onwards of your pack. Before we begin this item, I just need to make members aware of a minor procedural amendment to the recommendation D, which should be made to the Combined Authority Board, just as B and C are. Could I ask Emma White, Transport Programme Manager, to introduce this report? Emma, over to you again.
The recommendations for the March Area Transport Study include A. Note completion of the March Full Business Case 1. Recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 4.1 million for the construction of Matts Broad Street. Recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 300,000 to complete the Full Business Case 2, and D. Delegate authority to the interim head of transport and in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer, to enter into a grant funding agreement with Cambridgeshire County Council. MATS was taken to Transport and Infrastructure Committee and Board in October 2022, where full business case 2 was approved to start and a reallocation of budget for C4 utility costs were approved, as well as beginning work on the pedestrian and cycling strategy. The March project is part of the Transforming Cities Fund, and the programme from this was agreed at the last TIC and CA board. So the full business case 1 focuses on the Broad Street scheme, and like Bengate, is split into 5 dimensions. The strategic dimension considered the policy context and the recommended package of MATS improvement schemes, and made sure which they strongly align with the vision objectives for national, region and local policies and the need for interventions in March. The economic dimension demonstrates that the March Area Transport Scheme achieves a benefit to cost ratio of 2.23 and offers high value for money. The Broad Street scheme itself was looked at on its own, and that gives a core BCR of 8.37, which equates to a very high value for money. The financial dimension demonstrates that the scheme has been robustly costed and fits with the funding allocation available. The commercial dimension confirms the procurement strategy for the Broad Street scheme, which will be led by the Eastern Highways Alliance. The management dimension demonstrates that the recommended package of MATS improvement schemes is delivering through governance, organisation structures and roles, lines of accountability and resourcing. Please note that the March Broad Street project and the March Future High Street Fund projects are intrinsically linked, and one cannot be successfully built without the other. The full business case 2 is looking for approval of 300k to finish the business case. The case focuses on St Peter's Road, Peas Hill and 20-foot road, with the Northern Industrial Link Road remaining at outline business case level. Thank you.
And I do want to just comment on the incredibly thorough work that's been put into preparing a really, really thorough briefing for us in all of this. So I'm sure that must have taken a long time to put together. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Yes, Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I would like to also to echo your comments about the amount of work that has gone into this. As Emma has just voiced, the fact that this is very much intertwined with the March High Street rejuvenation, which actually started this week on Monday. And it is critical that the two are interlinked and one can't go forward without the other. So I am very happy to support this, and I hope it will be supported by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Shaler.
Thank you very much, Chair. And on the Cambridgeshire Highways, we are very happy to be playing a strong part in this. I was going to mention the fact that these two projects are really dovetailed, and I'm very happy to be part of this system for especially improving pedestrian access and support local communities and the trading environment in the core of March. I think it's a wonderful project. Thank you.
So I have Councillor Thornborough and then Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Thornborough.
This is an exciting project, but I just want to say that this committee has consistently asked and supported the scheme of improved train connections between March and Wisbech, and I think that's an aspiration we all have, and we look forward to it happening. And I think that will that connection will enhance the way people move into March, and it would, I think, just looking further ahead, I do think it needs to be considered that there may be that train connection and the improvements that will bring for alternatives to car use. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to make the point that so both myself and Councillor Shaler, as he's alluded to, we've looked at these projects on an ongoing basis on the County Council Highways Committee. You know, these are very significant amounts of money that are being put into developing the infrastructure, notwithstanding the transport benefits and the community benefits. So I think never let it be said that combined authority is not paying full attention to, towns like March. They're getting very significant funding, which a lot of my residents in my part of the world would die for. So I'm not going to. I don't have an issue with it, but I think we should just recognise what the officers have done, particularly, and the level of support that the combined authority is giving March. Thank you.
Are there any? Councillor Seaton.
Yes, to come back on Councillor Thornbury's comment, and it's very true. I mean, the Wisbech March Railway is an intricate part of the future, but it is quite a way in the future at the moment. And I think one of the big problems is the Ely Junction, and that seems to be the pinch point for a lot of the possible improvements in rail travel. So whilst I totally agree that that would make excellent news for March and for the transport opportunities, it is something I think that we're not able to progress at the moment until we get proper arguments from government on this. Thank you, Chair.
I don't. Well, Councillor Shaler.
Just a very, very quick mention. I would like to support this as well. We have consistently the rail link between Wisbech and March, and mention the fact that March also links over to Peterborough and the Peterborough New University. So not everything goes to Cambridge, unfortunately.
Councillor Shaler, you shock me. Would either of the officers like to comment on that? We have both of you. Don't really mind. Tim first.
Yep. So just on the ELA capacity, I think I updated the committee at the in November, but just to remind members, but also to recap around what we're doing on that. So we've got the Subnational Transport Board, both for East England and Heartland, but also Transport East, are actively lobbying on ELA capacity. We are also trying to get with that group. We're trying to get an all-party parliamentary discussion in government that actually looks from all the way from the Felixstowe port all the way through to Liverpool, etc., and to demonstrate how important Ely air capacity is. So we are playing an active role in that, and we're engaging with other combined authorities across the country on that, along with subnational transport bodies, and also we are taking the opportunity to lobby with our local, but also the MP, but also Department for Transport on the importance of Ely air capacity.
I think it'd be fair to say that we need to note the support of this committee for that Ely area capacity work. Emma, did you want to add anything else? Okay, so if there are no more questions, I propose we move to the vote. So item A is an item to note. Let's note the completion of that business case. Item B is a recommendation for the drawdown of funds for the construction of the Broad Street part of the MATS. May I see votes in favour for recommendation B? So that is, that is unanimous. Okay, so now we have item C, that's recommendation to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 300,000 for the completion of the FBC2. Can I see votes in favour? That's unanimous. And a reminder on item D that this is also a recommendation to the Combined Authority Board. This is the delegation of authority item. Can I see votes in favour, please? Thank you. I am summarising the recommendations on the advice of the Deputy Monitor Officer, who says that that is acceptable. If anyone in the room would prefer me to read out each recommendation in full, please tell me and I will revert to that. But you do have that in front of you in your paperwork. So thank you, Emma. Is that your last item today? I've got another one from you. So thank you for that. Now we're going to go back to item 2.3, which is the local transport and connectivity plan. You can find that on page 641 onwards of your pack. And just bear with me while I go back up to my notes on that. Okay. So this is the local transport and connectivity plan, item 2.3, and Emma will introduce this report.
The Transport and Infrastructure Committee is recommended to take note on the progress towards the local transport and connectivity plan, including the delay in the overarching programme for the finalisation of the strategy document. Take note and comment on the draft digital policy document and recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the drawdown of 100,000 of STA funding and the application of 178,000 ring-fenced grant received from DfT to undertake the next stages of the LTCP. The LTCP was taken to committee and board in January 2022, where a verbal update on progress towards the LTCP, particularly the soft launch engagement and the formal consultation, was given. The alternative fuel summary was also taken to committee in July 2022 to discuss the draft strategy and the post 6-week consultation. In summary, the LTCP consultation closed on the 4th of August after 12 weeks. During this period, stakeholder feedback was also collated. The draft consultation report and the USAID read document is appended to this paper. Currently, the LTCP is being updated following this consultation. We are still awaiting the new LTP guidance, which was due in September last year, and this remains a risk to the programme. As a consequence, a revised programme has been developed. Following receipt of the draft guidance, an assessment of the LTCP against the requirements will be made. Government have outlined that if schemes, initiatives and transport planning tools are not included within the document, then future funding opportunities will be limited. We have also been in productive discussions with DfT on both the LTP guidance and the quantifiable carbon reduction that is needed as part of an LTP going forward. Our own current carbon assessment work of the LTCP is ongoing, and this work will seek to quantify the predicted carbon impact of the LTP schemes that have already been identified, and it will also undertake a best practice review to inform the type of schemes that might be necessary to consider in order to plug the gaps that remain with the carbon. Also, as part of the LTCP, the draft digital policy is appended to this document for review. As discussed earlier, the alternative fuel strategy was out for consultations for 6 weeks, which ended at the 21st of December 2022. Following this consultation, the feedback has been analysed and the strategy will be updated and hopefully taken to the next round of committees and boards. Also, in parallel of this, the electric vehicle implementation work is being undertaken. Thank you.
So there's a little lag, isn't there, on these microphones? Before we go to questions from the committee, we have received a question from the Overview and Scrutiny Lead Member for the Transport Committee, which I believe, Dan, you're going to read out, and then I will provide an answer for. Or Tim, do you do the answer for this? Okay. Okay, Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the question is as follows. Regarding page 641, what are the interdependencies of the LTCP and the GCP's making connections proposals in terms of both content and timing?
Thank you. And actually, Tim, as you're here, or Emma, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, so the GCP City Access consultation closed in late December, and the partnership are currently in the process of reviewing their responses. In the meantime, the Combined Authority continues to progress the LTCP, with, as outlined by Emma previously, with a May-June sign-off envisaged. The LTCP sets a strategic objective for the region, and therefore the Making Connections work has and will need to demonstrate a clear line of sight and golden thread with the strategic document and its direction.
Thank you. And committee members, you also have copies of the answers to these questions tabled with you, and they will be put in as part of the minutes as well. So do we now have any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Thornborough got in first, then Councillor Choreste, Councillor Shaler. I'll take those three on block first, and then we can go on to any others. Councillor Thornborough.
Some of this is comments. So it's really interesting to see the results of that have come through from the consultation. and particularly the different opinions in different areas. And so the trains are high priority for East Cambs and Fenland, and and uh, and buses generally, apart from Cambridge, where there's a priority to reduce congestion. But major transport solutions are so important because people make life decisions based on reliable transport. And the train stations are actually showing to be much more reliable than the bus network. And the buses really do need to be sorted out so that people can choose to live in a place and actually rely on what is there and what they expect to come through. So I think I think we do need to continue to focus on trains and improvements that we can make. I note that Soham Station has had more than 14,000 visitors going through that station in the short time since it's been opened, which is incredibly successful. And I think we should think about things like doubling the line from Ely to Soham, which was started 10 years ago, and that's run out of money. At present, there's only a 2-hourly service stopping at Soham. And just imagine if we could increase the frequency, the connectivity to there will continue to make a huge difference to the residents. And I know the young people come in by train from Soham to Cambridge for the nightlife. And there are other quick wins on the trains that we should be considering. One of the questions I've got is, are we looking and taking into account the ONS survey results from that are coming out? They're beginning to come out, but they are going to be very important source of data and information that will feed into all local authority and decision making. So can we actually be sure that they are taken on board because they've only recently come through? I just want to that was one question. I just want to make a question about the digital side of this. And I think it's great that Mayor Nick linked connectivity with transport. But on the 8th of March is International Women's Day. And this year, the theme is innovation and technology for gender equality. So that it's going to be focused on innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and empowerment for all women and girls. And I wonder if the combined authority could acknowledge that this is happening on that date, and whether it could support initiatives in this country and locally that might be happening because of the good work that the combined authority are already doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. There's quite a lot in that, so I might take that to officers now before I go into other questions. So who's going to pick up on these? Tim.
If I start, and then if I miss anything, then I'm sure Emma will chip in. So I think the point around buses and the importance of those, I think that both picked up later in this agenda, but also in subsequent discussions that we're going to have both at board, but also how we take things forward around how we prioritise our bus network. The key part of that is around integrating the bus network with rail stations, and allowing it, not just providing those services into the rail station. That'd be a benefit in the main to start with, but also making sure that the timings of the buses link with the timings of the rail routes, etc. So you're not standing around for 20, 30, 40 minutes, etc. But we do engage with Network Rail, but also the train operators. So we continue that engagement around both the routes and the timetables themselves, because that's ultimately set by Network Rail, but also how we can improve the environment. So we are trying to develop that thinking. On the ONS, so any survey data we get that can be fed into the development of the plan is welcome, and that will be that needs to be fed in. But also, the LTP is the high level document. There's a number of daughter documents that sit under it that will continue to evolve over the course of the next 12, 18 months. And obviously that ONS data will need to be fed into that program. And then your point about International Women's Day. So I will engage with the com team to make sure that we take something on that on board. And then I was speaking to Councillor Smith yesterday around some of the things that the team do and actually produce articles, etc. So, for example, I've done an article around social exclusion and mental health and transport, but also part of that is being the perception of safety. Therefore, that impacts definitely on female travellers, also on young people, etc. So we are doing things both professionally that you hear about on a day-to-day basis, but we're also doing a lot of things and engaging with our peers. And I don't know whether the committee would welcome sharing some of those articles, etc., just so you know some of the thinking that we are doing, what is behind the scenes as well.
And I would assume that we would all really welcome those kind of additional bits of information that could come to us as committee members that are not papers, but share some of the other work that our team are doing. Emma, is there anything else you wanted to come in on that? So I now have Councillor Tereste, then Councillor Shaler, then Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Tereste, please.
Yeah, thank you. You may have answered the question already, but I didn't quite pick it up. Have you had the latest guidance from DFT? No. So we don't really know whether what we want to do will match what they want us to do. I've got two. Can I? Two questions. Is that okay? And I noticed that we're doing, I assume, all sorts of technical work to try and find out how it's best to reduce our traffic flows by 15% or more. How are we getting on with that? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So next I have Councillor Shaler and then Councillor Wakeford, and then we'll go to officer responses on those.
Thank you very much, Chair. As mentioned, this is a high level, but this is, this is the combined authority. We look to the combined authority for strategy. I noticed that the majority of the respondents agree with the main direction and policies, and that's centered on bus and active travel, but broadly in giving people alternatives so that there's not so much dependency on cars, and especially people now in work who can hardly afford their housing, let alone outlay on cars. It's really horrendous. The second thing I wanted to mention is that this shows we've had a very high level of interworking between the CCC and the combined authority on this and developing these drafts, especially when it comes to the area and district strategy work and the you said we did analysis, which is just very, very welcome. I was going to also mention the fact that we haven't had the guidance from DFT, and this may change things, but as it stands, we are on the Highways Committee. We're hoping to bring pretty much the final draft of this to the March committee meeting. So that's our kind of timeline on this. So thank you very much.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Yeah, the consultation and the summary of the responses were of significant interest to read. I paid particular attention to the institutional responses or responses from councils, district, city, parish, and something called Cambridge County. But we know they expand more broadly. I think the summary in 5.1.3 in the appendix, am I on appendix 1? I think with just 3 bullet points, I think encapsulated very clearly the gist of the responses from Huntingdonshire as well as other councils, and I just flag the key bullet about the challenge around the first bullet there, the challenge around providing more clarity on how goals and ambitions are to be realised in practice. But I think the answer to Councillor Thresk question earlier about the about the lack of further information from the department is relevant there, and I think this has been picked up to some degree, at least in the policy, to the extent possible, and in a high-level way, as Councillor Shaler contextualised for us. So thanks, and I'm happy to support this moving forward, and then we can get into the sort of detailed how questions subsequently.
Thank you. Emma, are you going to pick up those, or Tim? Emma?
Yeah. Yeah, happy to start, and then if there's anything to add, I'll pass to Tim. In terms of the DFT guidance, no, we haven't had it yet. But we are, as I said in the paper, talking and working with DFT. We're also working with WSP on the 15% reduction, who are also working with DFT on the QCR that's needed as part of the LTCP. So from the dialogue we're having at the moment, we feel we're on the right track for when the guidance does come out, and hopefully we won't need to make too many major changes, but until that comes out, it does start sort of is a risk to the programme going forwards, and a mapping exercise we can undertake when it does come out to understand what we need to do to update. In answer to the 15%, that work's going well and due to end at the end of January. I'm hoping you've all had invites yesterday to a meeting on the 2nd of March to explain the carbon results, what the gap is, and sort of the policy levers that have been looked at or schemes that have been looked at that could bring around changes to reducing carbon. And then I think, just to pick up Councillor Wakefield's point about, I guess, the going forwards and realising it, part of the work that Tim sort of touched on earlier is the sort of implementation plan and programs to work, which we will need to sort of bring back, whether that's part of the LTP or a child document underneath. It's sort of work we're looking at to bring back to you all, which then also feeds into the active travel, buses, the carbon reduction, the biodiversity, and making sure it all ties together. So that's sort of all part of the sort of next stage of the LTP.
Oh, sorry. Just to add to complement what Emma's just said around the guidance itself. So the guidance, for note, the guidance was due out in autumn last year. So the conversation I had with DFT was, even by their standards, this is stretching it into the next financial year. But I am constantly talking to the deputy director of that department. I've stressed the importance of getting the guidance out, because ultimately you'll get to a stage where the work that we got will start to become out of date, and you have to go back and revisit it. So we need to get that out the door. But the other point is that DFT have said to me and a number of others is around, we need to make sure that we do map our document against their guidance, which is what Emma alluded to earlier. Is because ultimately, if the priorities that are listed in our LTCP do not reflect what's in the guidance, then that will preclude us from bidding for funding in future years. There may be certain things that we don't want to put in our LTCP that we think are too contentious. Therefore, there'll be a conscious decision not to put them in, and therefore not bid in future. But we need to be able to make that decision as a committee and as a board to be able to say that we haven't put that in for X, Y, and Z reasons. And the other point is, just for clarification for Councillor Thornborough around SOAM. It is 40. We had 40,000 passengers for SOAM for the last calendar year, and it was 14,000 up to March, so it's 40,000 for the last year.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments on this item? Councillor Thornborough.
One thing I have raised before is that I would really like park and rides to be called transport hubs, not just park and rides, and train stations need to be major transport hubs. We have train stations in this region which you cannot catch a bus to, which is astonishing. So every train station really should be analysed and actually planned on how it can be a major transport hub for all forms of active travel and buses. And the park and rides, I really think they need to be considered as transport hubs for I think we are in reality considering them as transport hubs, but we should call them that and not park and ride because of our ambition to provide really good sustainable travel and allow people to choose not to own a car in the future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Are there any more questions or comments on this item? In which case, Councillor MacDonald has stepped out, but we are still quorate. So I suggest that we proceed to the vote. So items A and B are to note, and item C is a recommendation of the drawdown of funding and the application of a grant to undertake the next stages. Can I see votes in favour of that item, please? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 votes in favour, 6 votes. That's unanimous. Thank you. I would now suggest that we pause for 10 minutes, take a short comfort break. So if we can be back here, please, at 11:35, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. If we can stop the recording while we do that. have other committees this afternoon. So thank you. Are we live? Wonderful. So we now move on to item 2.4, which is transport modelling for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. That can be found on pages 761 onwards of your agenda pack. And I believe that we have Michael Soper, Analysis and Evaluation Manager, online. Is that right? To introduce this report. Michael, over to you.
Yes, hello. Can I just check you can hear me clearly? Yep, brilliant.
We
Thank
can
you
hear
very
and
much.
see you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. As I say, yes, my name's Michael Soper. I'm lead for analysis, data, evaluation, evidence, anything to do with numbers at the Combined Authority. So just so you can understand, a quick brief reminder to the committee that you last considered the item on modelling in July 22. At that point, I came to committee to talk about the change in method of delivery for the modelling. In particular, we were moving to appointing the County Council as lead commissioners for the model and to take the modelling forward on our behalf as a combined authority, but together in partnership with ourselves and Peterborough City Council. This was so we could bring together one cohesive set of evidence and modelling for the whole CPCA area. And I got approval for the first tranche of the money to be released for the modelling. That was 740k, and that was on the basis that we would form a steering group and commission the work that I'm going to talk to you about now. So reporting on progress, I chaired the model steering group. I'm pleased to say that group's come together effectively across our local authorities with CCC and Peterborough City Council members and a range of corresponding members together with the technical advisors. What we've done is we've appointed contractors, WSP and Atkins, through the County Council's framework contract to provide us with a full specification for a transport model, and that model specification report has been through several iterations and is attached as an appendix. So it gives us a full definition of what we're commissioning, what we are paying for, in effect. And we've negotiated a full delivery mechanism together with the County Council and PCC and their appointed consultants, WSP and Atkins, through that framework contract. So what I'm doing is coming forward today recommending that the remaining funds within the already allocated for transport modelling within MTFP, recommend that the committee then go on to recommend to the board that those be released for commitment, and that is against a delivery timetable up to the end of March, April 2024, over which we'll be collecting the new set of data, comprehensive set of data for the model and building that model. Just reminding members that is the previous iterations of models, like the one for the south of the county, have a lifespan of around 10-12 years. So that's the sort of investment time that we're looking at here, really a usage time of this new model that we're commissioning. Couple of questions, a couple of preemptive points on the paper. The data costs, so the costs of collecting data, we're out to tender or quote on the costs of those. So if you look at the financial table, that is an estimate that I've put together with County Council's lead modeller. That is a high estimate. We're carrying a considerable contingency in there, so I expect those costs to come in under what is estimated there. So that's really where the project is carrying its contingency. And you may note that the running costs of the model, that is the ongoing revenue costs to the County Council and to a lesser extent to Peterborough City Council, we are negotiating separately. So I will come on and talk about those at a separate meeting, if you like, or a separate committee. Part of the aspect of those is for us to look at the trading profile and the possibility at the moment for trading, once the model is established, for charging developers of very large housing applications, for example, some element of cost recovery from the County Council for their work on that, and how much is chargeable versus how much the combined authority needs to support on into the future. So that's subject to a separate negotiation. So we partly because if that is a call on CPCA revenue, you'll understand that our main revenue income is the fixed 8 million a year revenue part of our core grant from government, and that's been fixed at a fixed sum over time, and inflation eats into that over time. So we need to be secure in the fact if we are taking on additional revenue costs, we can manage those on into the future. So we'll be dealing with that separately. That's it at the moment. I'm happy to sort of recommend to the committee that we've made sufficient progress to move on to commissioning the actual build of the model and the work that is needed over the next 24 months. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald, Councillor Thornborough, Councillor Shaler.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a comment to Michael. This is welcome, Michael, because we'd been looking for what seems to be a robust and up-to-date model, especially with new travel patterns post-COVID. So I haven't read every single page of the 85-page WSP Atkins, but I've probably read about half of it. So it does look comprehensive, and hopefully it'll really help us in terms of transport planning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I just be sure, I'm sure you are, that the ONS data that's coming out now is going to be considered, because it's actually quite interesting. It's picking up some of the behaviour change during the pandemic about how the way we work and study, but also the massive changes to retail that started before the pandemic and continues. And, you know, we're still sort of trying to understand the future of retail and try to plan and allow for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I remember the previous model, it didn't cover very much of the area, and it says here that the geographical area. Does that include adjacent areas to the combined authority area? The other model also didn't include trains. I think it didn't have quite a bit, you know, all of the sort of combined, and we are looking at creating hubs and exchanges, so it should have everything. Does it include, for instance, Voi scooters now?
Are there any more questions? Michael, over to you.
Right, yes, just to take up those points in order. Yes, certainly in terms of gathering up-to-date information, if you like, we've had a look at the data points that we are using, and if you like, we're going for the be at the bang here, which is old Lingford Christie saying of getting right on there. So this spring is really the first opportunity we've got to collect a comprehensive data set post-COVID, where everybody and all the advisors that we have are satisfied that the movements across this spring really represent what we have post-COVID, without the influence of the petrol prices being at their absolute peak, and with people's commuting patterns and shopping patterns settling back into, if it's hybrid working or if it's, you know, the changes in shopping and things like that. So we're very much getting seizing the opportunity to collect data at the first opportunity that we can. Valid data, that is. At the end of that exercise of data collection, we'll have a data validation report where we can actually have a look at what we've got and assess it to make sure that it is absolutely a robust data set to form the core of the model. On the point of the Office for National Statistics for release of new census data, yes, we'll be incorporating that because it provides us with a significant amount of information on base population. We will be qualifying that data, however, with use of the County Council's annual population estimates, because they've I don't know if you're aware, but the county councils of population estimates over time have kept track with growth in a way that the Office of National Statistics' own estimates between census periods hasn't. So we've got to take a balanced view as to using the census data versus using our own additional local data and making the best use of what we've got. The point of caution on the ONS data is on working patterns, particularly the commuting data within the ONS census it was collected at the height of COVID in January 21. So we're going to have to feed in some supplementary information based on the best technical advice that we have in order to do that. But yes, we will be incorporating the census data into this. A final question on full coverage. Yeah, we're moving to a model that covers all of the CPCA area as a single model. So we're moving away from having the a whole network of small models versus the and the major model being based around the centre of the county. So sorry, the south of the county. So we are having full coverage. The model will certainly pick up active travel, cycling, walking. It will pick up bus transport. It will pick up train transport. As far as the Voi scooters are concerned, they'll be included within as a category of active travel, essentially. So they will be in there, but those flows will be taken into account. What we've been able to do is have access to a whole range of additional flow data from Voi, direct from Voi, in terms of who's hiring and who's traveling around. I could do a lecture on all the maps that we've got drawn from that in terms of the major flows. So there are very specific town centre flows that the Voi scooters do contribute to, which we can take account of. I think that flow won't be dealt with specifically as just being Voi scooters. It will just add proportionally to those people who we consider to be travelling actively. So we'll probably include those within the cycling as a form of individual personal transport that people can move themselves around with, rather than see every report separating them out into, well, this is bicycles and this is Voi, or whatever supplier we do have on the scooters. But those movements will certainly be taken into account. Yeah.
Councillor Shaler.
Sorry, just to come back very briefly on that. The reason I mentioned Voi is because, as you know, they are a fantastic source of data, and that's the kind of numbers you like to crunch. The other thing is that we are desperate to get some sort of direction from the Department of Transport on just what is a scooter, what is a powered bike, and presumably, if we do get that, that will change what is on the carriageway, what is on shared paths, and that will have, and your model, I guess, could handle that kind of a change.
Yes, one of the things that we're doing here in the background is updating all the IT, and building in that level of flexibility so we can improve the model as it goes on. I mean, it's a similar way in practice to how the previous model has worked, in terms of there has been new iterations done, but with the software update, we'll be able to do that more quickly and have a more flexible model going into the future to take account of some of those mode changes. And I do agree with you. Yes, we are waiting. Again, waiting for the DFT needs to be a theme, but we are still delivering the voice scooter under an experimental traffic order, as a pilot. And yes, we are awaiting the DFT to bring forward, or ministers to bring forward legislation to look at definitions of a whole range of personal electric vehicles of various sorts.
So, Councillor Wakeford.
That was a very helpful answer that covered off some of my concerns. So I'd just say residually, Huntingdonshire would be very interested if you do need further Voi pilot sites. But I think not knowledge that you can build that into the models without us having to sort of go back to the drawing board, given the direction of travel that we have plenty of areas within our sort of mixed town and rural district, especially these vehicles will be well suited for. So thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no further comments, then we will proceed to the vote. So item A, recommendation is to note the progress on this delivery. Item B is the recommendation to the Combined Authority to agree the business case, including the timeline and future arrangements for the delivery of the model. Can I see votes in favour, please? That's unanimous. Item C is a recommendation to approve the drawdown of the money within the MTFP, the Medium Term Financial Plan. Can I see votes in favour, please? That's unanimous. So those items are passed unanimously. We now move on to item 2.6, the authorisation of expenditure on Zebra, and this can be found on pages 1297 onwards of your pack. And Tim Bellamy will be introducing this report. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm here to present an update on the zero emissions bus regional area project, otherwise known as ZEBRA. The Transport Committee in September 2021 was informed of the funding allocation. The combined authority led a consortium of itself, Stagecoach and GTP and the DFT on a proposal to buy 30 zero-emission bus electric double-deckers. The combined authority secured funding from the Department for Transport of 4.295 million. In addition, 2.25 million have been provided by the Greater Cambridge Partnership and a further 7.035 million from Stagecoach. With the funding, 30 electric buses will be delivered and in service by the end of April 2023. Delivery of these vehicles have unfortunately been delayed due to transportation issues between Sweden, Egypt and the United Kingdom. The combined authority and Stagecoach, however, remain confident that the fleet will be fully in service by the end of April 2023, as previously envisaged, with the first vehicle being delivered between mid to late February to get to start that fleet. Therefore, this paper asks for the Transport Committee is recommended to the board to approve the capital expenditure of 2.994 million of fund allocated for the business case and the purchase of the fleet, and this equates to 18% of the total cost, which comes in at just over 16.5 million. I commend this paper to the board to the committee.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I'm certainly very interested and excited by this development. We're really looking forward to what is learnt from it. I think obviously it makes sense piloting in a more densely urban area, but particularly in terms of the route choices going forward, it would be particularly useful if those decisions could be made with one eye on the value of data to support exploration of the expansion of electric buses elsewhere in the CPCA area, which aren't necessarily as densely urban as Cambridge. And I think you have at least sort of some options in your route choice there to catch routes that might be approximate to ones elsewhere. So looking forward to the learning and very happy to support.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, just to echo some of the comments from Councillor Wakeford. So I totally understand why we're starting where we are, and that that's partially around infrastructure and Cowley Road, and I know Abraham Park and Ride. So I'm sure the authority has plans to extend to Trumpington Park and Ride, other park and rides, so that people can really see the buses in operation. But it's a very welcome development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very short question about charging facilities for buses going forward. At the moment, I understand that this kind of limits where they can be deployed. And does the combined authority have plans for putting in charging for these kinds of vehicles in other places?
Tim, do you want to come back on those?
Yep, I can come back on those comments. So, regarding the lessons learned and looking beyond just Cambridge itself, we believe that there will be a Zebra round 2 at some point from the Department of Transport. So, as part of that bidding process, we will probably we will look at other areas beyond Greater Cambridge, so Peterborough, Hunts, South Cam, across the Eden, where is the most appropriate location to expand that fleet. So lessons learned will be fed back, and I think a part of the committee will need to explore what those lessons are and how we can roll those out further. And then with regard the depot, so I've been reassured by Stagecoach that the depot for these 30 is all ready to go. All the facilities are in place and ready to be utilised. And then looking further ahead, link back to what I just said around Depot 2, if we need to look at the depots across the region to make sure that if we are going to implement this fleet going forward, the way we need to go, we need to make sure that those depots are appropriate and fit for purpose. So yes, we need to look at those going forward.
Thank you. Are there further questions on this? And I'm just going to exercise Chair's privilege to say I think this is a very exciting initiative, and I'm looking forward to hearing how this works and how the next potential stages work in the future. So I'm going to move to the vote, and there's one recommendation on this, a recommendation to the board to improve the capital expenditure. So can I see votes in favour, please? That's unanimous. So we now move on to the final item. This is item 2.6. This is the bus update, including the framework, and this can be found on pages 1301 onwards of your pack. And this is back over to Tim to introduce.
Thank you again, Chair, members. Firstly, I wanted to give an update regarding the bus strategy. This was launched last Wednesday with incorrect document uploaded, first with track changes and the second version which was pre-Transport Infrastructure Committee. As soon as we were made aware, this was taken down, and on Friday we relaunched the consultation with the same version that was agreed at this committee and at board. And those people that have completed a survey to date and left their details have all been individually contacted, or will be individually contacted by the end of this week, to ask them to resubmit or confirm that their original comments are unchanged, so we can take those comments on board as we go forward. This consultation the consultation end date has been moved back to ensure that we have a 6-week consultation, and still the findings will be fed back into the committee in due course. In September, Stagecoach confirmed a number of surveys would be withdrawn. The combined authority commenced a competitive tender process that offered alternative operators the chance to provide these. These 23 contracts, so that was the 18 in full and 5 partial contracts, are due to finish at the end of March 2023, unless the combined authority invokes the 1-year extension clause. The decision on funding for passenger transport and buses is inextricably linked with the budgetary discussions at the combined authority board next week, and therefore the notice period for operators to submit tenders will necessarily be restricted. In addition, at the board meeting in October, members were informed of a short-term waiver issue to delay the tender of 6 services to terminate at the end of March 2023, rather than the original contract end date. The committee is therefore asked to recommend to the board to approve the procurement and retendering of the services provided in the 6 contracts. And in addition, the committee is recommended to ask the board to approve the extension of the 23 contract, which are provided for the 12 months. Both processes are subject to budget approval for these services. Finally, the board were advised previously in October 2020 that a thorough, robust and comprehensive review of the bus network would be completed by March 2023. In order to understand the views of the general public and how best to shape the overarching network, it is important that the work is informed by the consultation that is currently out on the bus strategy. It is now envisaged that a full review of the service provision across the region will be presented to this committee in autumn 2023 for consideration ahead of the 2024-25 budget setting process later in the financial year. Feedback on the will be thought from the committee on the is thought from the committee on the initial direction of travel in relation to the overarching framework, which is included in the pack you have, and I recommend I commend the paper to the committee.
Thank you. And just to ensure that we are all clear, the votes we are making today are about the buses, not about how we fund the buses. It is about endorsing the services. It's up to the board to have that debate next week on the funding. Now, I can already see 2 questions here. So Councillor Wakeford first, Councillor MacDonald, Councillor Shaler. Councillor Thornborough. We'll start with those. Right, Councillor Seaton. Is Councillor Terresto going to make it a full house, I wonder? Right. Can't remember now who I started with. Councillor MacDonald, I think.
Sorry, I thought it was Councillor Wakeford. I'll be brief. Obviously, especially with the both the focus on 2.1 and the 6 services mentioned there, and the 23 services, obviously that's very welcome for renewal for 12 months going forward. Maybe not for today, but a future, if a future tendering and procurement could cover more than 1 year, so that we just have, confidence in a, let's say, a medium term plan for the provision. But I welcome both the procurement and retendering for the 6 and for the 23. So thank you very much.
Thank you likewise, and Chair, your underlining of what this discussion is and isn't reinforced observation I was going to make from what was contextualised from the officers. So thank you. Certainly, we will be supporting the recommendations here. I guess it sort of begs the question slightly as to what would happen if we didn't on recommendation C, for example. But I hope that's that's not going to happen. I suppose my more specific question, really following on from Councillor MacDonald's, is the re-tendering for periods of a relatively short duration is what we need to be doing now. But as well as the routes specified, I'd be curious, arising from this, at what point we look at re-tendering of demand response that we've talked about before, and at what point a pilot becomes not a pilot, or are we able to make that decision about normalising it, as well as I think colleagues across the table have suggested previously that we've supported expanding it beyond lucky Huntingdonshire residents, because as we talked about before, and as we heard at the beginning of the meeting, this is a critical enabler of that additional level of provision, particularly for those of us representing more rural districts where traditional services aren't adequate.
Tim, are you okay if we keep going? Yeah. Right, Councillor Shaler.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we're at the beginning of this process, and it's very, very welcome. We're heading towards transport as a service, moving people around as a service, and to also mention Councillor MacDonald's point, we I think are very keen to move into the franchising stage of this, which will require much longer time commitments. Otherwise, what company would sign up to a franchising deal that only lasts months or a year? Going forward, I would ask that we keep in mind across the Cambridgeshire County, at least, education, transport, and of course aspects of rural isolation. And just to be a bit cheeky, I could ask, do we hear any mood music about, or what is required of us to get any kind of funding out of central government for our ambitions? Thank you.
Just we keep going, Councillor Thornborough. Tell me if I'm giving you too much, and we'll pause it. Councillor Thornborough.
Yes, I would like to. I'd like our Dial-A-Ride service to be considered. It's a bit like the Ting trial. Dial-A-Ride operates in Cambridge and actually into South Cambs, and is at capacity. I know the combined authority have had conversations with them in the past, but it needs to be part of a strategy. I think we also in Cambridge City subsidise some 3 late night services, and going forward in the future, it would be really, we work with the combined authority on this subsidy, but it would be really good if the future tendering could recognise the need of these late night services to ensure that the people of Cambridge are safe when they use the public transport. I also think that we need bus champions. Actually, we when we talk about a move to cycling, that's recognised that people need support to learn how to cycle and the cycle routes. I think there's a similar need for people to actually learn more about buses. If you're not used to buses, how to get the tickets, how to where the bus stops are. If you know, to encourage people to give up their cars, especially older people, they need help to learn. And I wondered if that's something that should be considered. Thanks.
Councillor Seaton. Then we'll definitely go to.
On now? Yeah, good. I will be supporting this paper, but a couple of comments I'd like to make. And as you would expect, you know, it'll be from a rural perspective. You know, we like in Fendon, like many of the rural areas, do have appalling services, really. And I do use the word appalling. And I think what was mentioned earlier about the connectivity between the rail stations and the buses. Well, I wish we had the buses to actually get to the rail stations, but we have spent a lot of money just recently on renovating March Station and Maney Station, and we're looking at Whittlesea. But the information and the timings to actually connect with those stations is just not happening at the moment. And the other point is that whilst I think everyone's ambition is to have less use of the car, in a rural area such as ours, of course, it's essential because you cannot get any bus services from the rural areas. There's no hubs for Ireland. You've got a Wisbech station, but you've got to get there from, say, Newton, which is sort of 6-8 miles away. But by the time you've got in your car, a lot of people would just carry on driving and go to March or Peterborough or King's Lynn or wherever. So, you know, whilst I support this paper, you know, and I can understand that it's a lot easier to get services within the urban areas than it is in the rural areas, you know, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that, you know, the rural areas do suffer very badly with a very bad system. And, you know, I hope that we can see some improvement in the not too distant future. Thank you, Chair.
Tim, definitely over to you.
Hopefully, I think there's 8 things. If I miss them, then please let me know. In relation to the tendering discussion throughout the framework around whether enhanced partnership or the franchising is the appropriate way to go, we are looking to bring a paper to the committee in the May-June round around where we are on that. So we're working continuing on the development of the appropriate framework. So that will come to committee in May-June. In relation to the length of the contracts and beyond 1 year, I don't believe it's an issue with regard to procurement of those contracts. It's more to do with the certainty of the funding of that. So it does. I slightly linked to what Councillor Smith said earlier, is the budget discussion next week is key because ultimately we need to make sure we have the funding for the year 2, 3, 4 and going on. So the extent of those contracts with procurement perspective is not a problem. It's making sure we have the funding going forward to support those services. In relation to where was I now? In relation to the education transport, so we're having conversations with county council and also Peterborough around how we provide home to school. The homeschool transport is done by county and by Peterborough. How we can make that come together and actually how we can do that better, because at the moment they're done for, I think, in parallel, and actually they could how we integrate those and actually the synergies, etc. Regard the government and the position of government. So The government at the moment have launched the £2 flat fare, which goes on until the end of March. So, and that is where they're putting a lot of their effort at the moment. And we have said to them that it's not just about £2 flat fare, because ultimately you need a service before you can actually then provide £2 flat fare. So, link back to Councillor Seaton's point, is we need to have continue to lobby government for subsidies around continuous bus services, etc. And also, we are going to update our bus service improvement plan, which will be coming to committee for sign off in May as well. To say, in addition to the subsidies, we also need to support our services with a number of initiatives, etc., taking forward and our implementation. On the thing about on dial-a-ride and late nights, that's a key component. If it's not drawn out enough in the strategy, we probably need to pull it out more in the strategy, and then ultimately outline how we'll do that better, and actually some of the schemes that come off the back of that, initiatives, etc. So I'll take that point on board. And definitely your point around Bus Champion. I think that as you say, we worked hard on getting an active travel advocate. I think we probably need to do something around the buses piece as well, and that's both from a technical perspective, but also how we articulate things in plain English to the general public, to how you get from A to B, and what's the easiest way to do it. Because I think that worry people. Where the bus stop is to start with, what's the closest bus stop to where I need to get to, how do I get a ticket, all those sorts of things. I think we just need to. There's a common piece in that as well, and we need to work with operators on that. And I'll table that at the operator forum that I have next week about how we start that conversation. And then the final point, I think, around Councillor Seaton's around the importance of rural connectivity and how we take that forward. I think that's a key component of the framework that we're trying to put forward, and actually the accessibility of key destinations. Are we reinforcing car dependency in certain areas, and actually how do we break that cycle? And I think that needs to be built into our framework to say the importance of bus services in our rural areas, in particular, in accessing our key destination is key, and that's not drawn out by passenger numbers sometimes, because ultimately you have some passenger numbers that are frequently used routes, which are great, but actually there are lower passenger numbers that may cost us more subsidy, but actually are a lifeline for some of our rural areas, and we need to make sure that that's built into the framework. I think that covered everybody's questions. If not, I'm happy to take more.
Thank you. And Councillor Shaler, I'll take you in just a moment, but you talked about funding, and I think it's a really important thing for us to note as a committee. We were saying before the meeting started that the funding for public transport in the east of England, I believe, is £16 a head. That's one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the country. And I think it is important that we note the decisions we're making in terms of that need for greater central government funding from this. Councillor Shaler.
Just to come back on some of Councillor Seaton, we very much understand in terms of rural isolation that people depend on cars, and in the past, often the provision of public transport drove the location of businesses, and if there's a train there, then that will attract certain, and that will create living environments. You build your house near to a tube station or whatever. So in some of this is how it is and how it can be, and I just wanted to mention it. I keep getting told about this from old timers about March as the Vegas of the Fens, when people could bus in and bus out in the evenings. So some of these things, it takes perhaps a little vision, and we'll see where we can go. But thank you.
Councillor Wakeford, Councillor Thornborough. And is there anyone else that wants to say one last thing before we pass on to final comments? Okay, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I just wonder if I might nudge on the demand response element, and sort of when pilots might become not a pilot. I appreciate that may have been encompassed in the response around the reason for the short single year tenures. Thank you.
I really appreciate all the work that's being done on this for the here and now problem, but we mustn't lose sight that in 2030 there will be no new petrol and diesel cars, and by 2035 there'll be no new hybrid cars to be purchased, and it will only be EV cars, which are substantially more expensive. And we need to think, we need to allow for a transition to a new way of traveling in the future. And it means investing now and planning now for the EV charge points, for the EV cars. But we can't just all swap to EV cars, as we know. I think the community cars will always need to be able to access cars, and community cars are being planned in the cities, but they need to be planned in the rural communities as well, so people can be a member of and use those cars, and it ideally would be cheaper than running a private car. So it's this is really good, but we need to be investing now for this transition to really help the most vulnerable people and the poorest in this region for a change of way of travelling. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll take the latter point and then I'll go back to the DRT. So on the rural isolation and the community cars and car clubs, etc. So that is that within the local transport connectivity plan, and actually some of our local areas. So where in our market towns we want to put those, and actually not just the market towns, some of our villages as well. And actually, how do we then get people like Enterprise or other companies to invest in those areas? So that is part of our strategy going forward. And then on the DRT is, as you say, when's a pilot, not a pilot. But I do think that that is a key component of how we look at our framework for next year, to actually go, do we want to extend as a committee, as a board, as a authority, do we want to extend our DRT offer and actually look at our overarching network and go, actually, can we serve some of our rural areas better by investing in demand responsive transport as well as or instead of, depending on where go back to the budget conversation, and how we improve accessibility in some of our, especially our rural areas, and allowing people to access our interchanges to allow people to then go further and actually make it smoother. So as Councillor Seaton alluded to start with, if people don't get in their cars and just carry on, because we need to give people the thought process needs to be, I want to get from here to wherever that location is, and it's really easy, seamless, smoothless, and integrated to allow me to do it by public transport, and it's a safe and affordable, and that's where we need to get to.
Thank you. And I'm hearing a lot of comments about the importance of getting the rural services as well as the city services right today. So I think we can make sure we really note that. Before we go to the vote, just to an item for note. First of all, I want to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Lead Member for Transport Committee for the very detailed number of questions that they have submitted on this item, and it's really helpful. With the advice of officers, we have a printed copy of all of those questions tabled in front of you. I am not proposing to have each question read out and answered, but simply to note that they are there. They have been answered. They will be part of the record. Clearly, if anyone has any questions on that, please do ask. Also, to note my thanks both to Tim for the items that he's been working on today and presenting. And Tim, if you could also pass on to Michael our thanks for his work on that previous item as well. Now, first of all, do we have any final questions or comments before we proceed to voting? Secondly, we have a procedural amendment just to make it easier in terms of ensuring the vote is correctly recorded for this, and I think I'm handing over to one of you two for that.
Thank you, Chair. So essentially, it's to extract from recommendations B, C, and E the delegations and move them into a separate recommendation F. So to recap quickly, recommendation A is to note. Recommendation B reads, recommended the CPA board to approve the procurement and retendering of the services provided by the 6 contractors listed at 2.10 of the report, and to approve the budget for these services. Recommendation C will now read, recommended recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the extension of the current 23 contracts with providers for a period of 12 months, subject to budget approval for these services. And these contracts will be reviewed as part of a full review of services. And recommendation E will now read, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the reappointment of the current suppliers for the provision of the ENTCS, in addition to approve the budget for this service. And there will now be an additional recommendation F to delegate authority to the interim head of transport to enter into contracts with successful bidders, as at recommendation B, to enter into contracts to extend the period as stated at recommendation C, and to enter into contracts with the suppliers as at recommendation E.
Thank you. So are we all clear on that? We're basically taking the recommendation to contract with bidders and suppliers out into a separate recommendation just to ensure it's all absolutely as it should be in those. I imagine we have to formally propose and second that procedural amendment. So I will propose, can I have a seconder, Councillor Wakeford? Thank you. So we now need to vote on that. Can I have those in favour of that procedural amendment, please? That's unanimous, thank you. So we now have that additional item F. With that in mind, I now move to the vote. Item A is for note. Item B is a recommendation around the 6 contracts. May I see votes in favour of that recommendation? That's unanimous. Item C is a recommendation on the extension of the current 23 contracts. Can I see votes in favour of that item, please? Also unanimous. Item D is really been covered because it's about noting and giving feedback. Item E is the ENTCS recommendation. Can I see votes in favour of item E, please? That's unanimous. And item F is the new recommendation, which covers off all the delegations. Can I see votes in favour of that item, please? That is also unanimous. Now, I'm just checking. We have one final item, which is the date of the next meeting. And the next meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee is scheduled for the 15th of March 2023. I would imagine that that Nick Johnson will be back by then. So I just wanted to say I've really enjoyed chairing this committee this morning. It's been a real privilege to be part of some very exciting decisions. Thank you for your forbearance. Unless I hear otherwise, I now declare the meeting closed and we may turn off the live feed. Thank you.